The yellow path. It never begins with blood, not at first. It begins with a whisper, a word that slips through the cracks of thought like a draft through an old door. A symbol seen in passing, a phrase that lodges itself in the back of the mind, echoing long after the page is turned. He thought it was fiction, an old book. Harmless, curious even. But some books are not written, they are remembered. And some truths are not meant to be recalled. He was no scholar, no seeker of forbidden things. Just a man anchored to routine, soothed by certainty. But curiosity is a door, and he opened it, slowly, unknowingly, until there was no turning back, until the dream crept in. And in the dream, a lake without reflection, a sky of torn silk, towers that lean as if listening, and always the same figure waiting, veiled in gold, crowned in shadow, faceless yet watching. Now the world seems less solid. Voices hide behind silence. Time forgets its order, and the deeper he goes, the more he wonders if he ever had a choice. This is how it begins. Not with blood, but with a story. One that ends in yellow.
He who gazes upon the tattered realm shall find his mind not shattered, but reassembled in patterns unknown to man. Beware the twin suns. Beware the stranger who smiles without eyes. For once the yellow path is walked, it is never unwalked. Fragment 3. Necronomicon.
Part 1. The donation box. It started with a box, not an ominous crate wrapped in chains or some pulsing artifact glowing under candlelight. Just a cardboard box, half collapsed, water-stained, tucked between a torn copy of The Secret Garden and someone's long-forgotten self-published poetry collection. Jace almost missed it entirely. He was behind the register at Elm Street Books, nursing a coffee gone cold and a headache born from fluorescent lighting and customer size. Rain whispered against the windows like a ghost with secrets, the kind of afternoon that made time feel suspended. The box hadn't been there that morning. When he opened it, a smell like dried lilies and old smoke hit him. Inside, more books. Of course, but one stood out, The King in Yellow. The title alone sent a strange ripple up his spine, though he couldn't say why. The cover was soft, like worn leather, yellowed with age and covered in faint embossed sigils, symbols that faded when you stared too long. No author, no publisher's mark. Just the title and a gold ribbon tied loosely around the middle like a gift. Or a warning. Jace chuckled. Someone's into their vintage horror. He almost tossed it onto the processing shelf, but something in the way the book sat in his hands, warm somehow, as if recently held, made him hesitate. Curiosity bloomed. He opened the first page. No dedication, no contents, just the start of the play.
Strange is the night where black stars rise, and strange moons circle through the skies.
He read it aloud in a whisper, and the air in the shop seemed to tighten. Behind him, a light flickered. Jace turned. Nothing. Outside, the street was empty, except a man in a yellow coat stood across the street facing the window. No umbrella, no expression, just watching. Then a bus passed and he was gone. Jace blinked at the glass, heart ticking faster than reason allowed. He waited for the man to reappear, to walk into view or cross the street. Nothing. Just rain and the pale reflections of flickering lights in the puddles. He laughed at himself, but it came out dry. He placed The King in Yellow under the counter. He'd read more later. For now, it felt better out of sight. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. Quiet customers, sleepy hours, and the occasional glance toward the window, half hoping, half dreading he'd see yellow again. That night, sleep came fast, but it did not come clean. The dream was quiet. Too quiet. Jace stood in a field of ash-colored grass. Every blade moved like it was breathing. Above him, twin suns hung in a sickly yellow sky, one weeping black oil, the other shivering like it was alive. There was no wind, no sound, just the soft pressure of existence. He turned slowly. In the distance stood a city, towers bent sideways like wilted flowers, roads curled into themselves, bridges arched into the sky and vanished. The buildings were carved from stone that pulsed faintly with something beneath the surface, like heartbeat or thought. A river of ink slithered between the ruins, and on its bank someone waited. A figure robed in tattered gold. Their face was hidden by a mask, cracked porcelain painted with an eternal smile. Jace couldn't move. His body was stone. The figure lifted one gloved hand, palm open, as if beckoning. A voice, not from the figure, but from within Jace's own chest, spoke.
"You have read the first verse. The curtain has risen. Carcosa remembers you."
Then everything shattered. Jace awoke, gasping, tangled in sweat-soaked sheets. The shadows in his room looked too long. The light from the street lamp outside his window had turned, somehow, a pale, flickering gold. And on his nightstand lay the king in yellow. He could have sworn he left it at the store. The yellow bloom. Jace woke again to the hum of the street lamp, its gold light spilling into his room, too bright, too unnatural. The air tasted faintly of decay, lilies perhaps, or something older. His skin was clammy, and for a moment he thought he'd forgotten how to breathe. The book. It was on his nightstand, as if it had never left. It was harder to tell where the night ended and the day began. Time felt thick, like it was caught between the turning of a page and the closing of a door. A few hours? Days? The clock on his wall ticked with agonizing slowness, its face yellowed with age, the hands hanging just past 3 o'clock. He stumbled out of bed, trying to ignore the soft crackle of electricity in the air. But then, the flowers. They were there again, sprouting from the cracks in the floor, delicate yellow petals clinging to the carpet like invaders. Jace knelt, a flash of his dream stirring. He swiped at the flowers with his hand, but they only multiplied, growing in patterns, an organic map of the unknown. They weren't real, he told himself, just his mind playing tricks. The dream, the book. You have read the first verse. The curtain has risen. Carcosa remembers you. He shuddered, tossing the flowers away like they were dirt. When he looked up, he found himself standing in front of the mirror.
His reflection, his eyes, wasn't right. Darker, sunken, almost hollow.
He took a step back, but his reflection didn't follow. His face lingered a second too long, eyes locked with his own. Then a smile stretched across the reflection's lips. Wide, too wide. Jace spun around, breath catching in his throat. The room was different. The walls leaned in, bending like the towers in his dream. The air was sticky, holding memories and forgotten things. The clock ticked faster now, its hands spinning like mad, like they were trying to escape. Jace's heart raced. He grabbed the book from the nightstand and slammed it shut, as if the act could shut out the growing madness. But the room, the world, shifted with him. He could still feel the weight of the twin suns pressing down on him, the sound of distant bells ringing like they were right there. The line between dream and waking was no longer clear. He was being pulled, dragged deeper by something older than sleep, something that knew him. The phone on his nightstand rang, its tone shrill, broken. Jace grabbed it, hands trembling.
Jace!
A voice whispered, thin as air.
Come to us. We've been waiting for you.
The mark of the dream. The phone call rattled in Jace's hand, the voice lingering like a faint whisper, a presence that felt too close. He hung up without saying a word, the receiver still warm against his ear. There was nothing else, just the pulse of the ringing silence. It had been 2 days since he first found the king in yellow, and still it called to him like a distant melody. Familiar, haunting, and irresistible. No matter how much he tried to push it away, something about the words in that book gnawed at his mind. The flowers had returned, now in his kitchen, their petals dusting the counter in soft clusters. A strange, moldy sweetness clung to them, as if they had bloomed there, in his own home, without explanation. He swept them into the trash, but the petals refused to fade. He could hear them in the walls. Every corner he passed, every room he entered, there was a soft whispering. The words in the play, the verses twisting. It was no longer a question of whether it was real. Jace had lost the ability to tell. His body felt heavier, his hands trembling with an unshakable tension, as though the world was shifting beneath him, like the earth was warping into something alien. In the mirror, his reflection was becoming more distant. He could no longer see his own eyes clearly. They were too deep, black, swirling like ink spilled into water. The days became fractured, a haze over his thoughts, a constant fog hanging just at the edge of clarity. He found himself at the bookstore without remembering how he got there. Hours lost, minutes slipping like grains of sand. The ticking of the clock in his head kept a rhythm, counting the beats of an unfathomable pulse. He saw faces, their faces, people he knew, people he didn't. Every time he looked up, they were staring at him, eyes gleaming with something unreadable. He swore he recognized a man in yellow, the same one from his dream. But when he blinked, he was gone. That night, Jace couldn't sleep. He paced his apartment, eyes darting from corner to corner, watching for movement that never came. The walls hummed, a low vibration that crawled beneath his skin. Then it happened. A shape appeared in the doorway. Not a man, not a figure, but a shape, an outline, like a shadow cast wrong. It stood there, motionless, for what felt like hours. Then, with an agonizing slowness, it stepped forward. Jace could feel his heart in his throat as it approached, the air thickening. His own breath caught, shallow and quick. It spoke, a sound like breaking glass.
"You are marked."
Jace stumbled back, blinking, but when he looked again, there was nothing there. Just an empty doorway. His mind screamed, "Wake up!" But he couldn't tell if he was still dreaming. He stepped outside. The world had changed. A world unraveled. It wasn't the street he remembered, the same lampposts, the same cracked pavement, the same grey sky, but everything felt wrong. The street stretched impossibly long, the buildings leaning toward him like watching eyes. The cars parked in orderly rows were too still, too lifeless. The air was thick with something he couldn't identify, something ancient. As Jace walked down the sidewalk, the world felt hollow. He could almost hear the pulse, faint but growing. It resonated in his chest, in his bones. He wasn't alone. A woman walked past him, tall, slender, with dark, unblinking eyes. She wore a yellow scarf, the ends fluttering as though caught in a non-existent breeze. Her gaze didn't falter, didn't move. She just stared straight ahead, as though she saw right through him. He turned to follow her, but she was gone. Jace shook his head, telling himself to stay calm. Just a trick of the mind. Nothing more. But the world kept shifting, pieces of it twisting. A storefront that had been there yesterday, gone. Buildings that hadn't been on this street before, appearing like shadows in the corner of his vision. The sky darkened without warning. His heart raced. Jace looked down and found the ground under his feet warping, as though the pavement itself was bending, twisting like a reflection in disturbed water. Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw it. A mask, a grotesque, cracked face painted in gold, half covered by a veil of yellow. The mask was there and then gone, slipping into the darkness at the end of the alley. He felt it, the tug, the call of Carcosa. He wasn't just seeing things anymore. The city, no, the world, was unraveling around him, pulling him into the very dream he had tried to forget. The loom of madness. The city was changing, not in the way buildings collapsed or the weather shifted. No, it was more profound. A subtle transformation, the very fabric of existence unraveling, like a tapestry undone by invisible hands. Jace knew he wasn't alone in this. Something was watching him, waiting for him to understand, to see beyond the veil. He found himself at the library, the same one he had visited countless times, lost in the scent of old paper and dust. But this time, the air was thick with an unseen weight. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting shadows that seemed to twist unnaturally, stretching as though they were alive. He approached the back shelves, where the forbidden books were kept, the ones no one talked about, the ones that whispered to those who dared to look. The book he had been reading, The King in Yellow, was only the beginning. It had led him here, and here he knew he would find the answers. He pulled a heavy tome from the shelf. Its leather cover was cracked, its spine ancient. The title was written in an alphabet he didn't recognize, but somehow he knew what it said. The Necronomicon. His fingers hovered over it, hesitation pooling in his chest. He had heard rumors of a madman named Abdul al-Hazred, who had written the book while under the influence of some otherworldly force. The Necronomicon was a map of madness, a guide to the unfathomable horrors beyond reality. He opened the book, and the room seemed to shrink, the air becoming thicker, colder. The words on the page writhed, their meaning slipping and sliding like water. The text was written in a language that didn't exist, yet Jace understood it perfectly. The unspoken truths of the Great Old Ones. The Great Old Ones are not gods, not in the way humans understand divinity. They are beyond understanding, ancient and indifferent to the mortal world. They existed before time itself, and they will exist long after the last star burns out. Their motives are beyond human comprehension, their desires alien to our senses. Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos, speaks in many voices, taking many forms. He is the messenger of the Old Ones, a trickster and manipulator who walks among men, weaving webs of madness to serve his incomprehensible will. The king in yellow, Hastur, is one of these ancient beings. His presence exists in the space between worlds, waiting for the right moment to breach the barrier between the realms. Those who come into contact with him, or who touch the knowledge of him, are marked. They are the heralds of his return, and their minds will bend to the will of Carcosa, the city of endless night. Jace's breath caught in his throat. The page burned into his mind, the words echoing in his skull like a warning. He knew then that he had been chosen. The cult had not found him by chance. They had been watching him, waiting for him to seek out the forbidden knowledge. The Necronomicon, the king in yellow, the whispered voices, all of it was leading him to the same conclusion. He was no longer just a man. He was a conduit, a vessel for something ancient and terrible. And in this moment, Jace understood the rules of the world he had stepped into, the rules of the Great Old Ones and their influence. As he continued to read, he started reading out loud.
The cosmic insignificance of man. Humans were but fleeting shadows in the grand scheme of the cosmos. The Old Ones were timeless, beyond the petty struggles of mortal beings. Reality itself was fragile, and its laws could be bent or broken by their will. The price of forbidden knowledge. Knowledge of the Old Ones was a curse. Those who sought it were forever marked, their minds fractured by the truths they uncovered. The more they learned, the further they descended into madness. The coming of Hastur. Hastur, the Yellow King, would return. His followers, those who had been marked by the knowledge, would usher in his arrival. His return was inevitable, but the timing was fluid. His servants would make sure the world was prepared, or perhaps prepared it for his reign. The veil between worlds, the boundary between the known world and the realms of the Great Old Ones, was thin, fragile. Every incantation, every invocation weakened it further. Reality itself could be shattered by those who sought to breach it. The heralds of Carcosa, those who were touched by Hastur's presence, those who had read the play, seen the symbols, heard the whispers, were not merely pawns in the game. They were heralds, the first to awaken the king. Their madness would spread like a virus, infecting others, until the stars aligned and Hastur could walk once more among men.
Jace slammed the book shut. His mind was reeling, spinning with the impossible knowledge. He had always believed that the universe was indifferent, cold and vast. But now the truth was worse. The universe was not just indifferent. It was hostile. He stood up, but the room had changed. The walls were pulsing, bending outward like they were breathing. The yellow light from the street outside bled through the windows, illuminating everything in a sickly, otherworldly glow. He stepped back and the floor creaked beneath him, too loudly. Then the whispers came again, faint but growing.
It is time to come home.
The voice was distant, like a memory trying to return to him. But it was not his own voice. It was the voice of something far older, far darker. The voice beneath. It is time to come home. The voice lingered after the sound was gone, echoing in a place deeper than memory. Jace staggered back from the table, his breath shallow and rapid. The world tilted, not metaphorically. The floor beneath him pitched, as if something beneath the surface had stirred, shifting the foundation of reality just enough for him to notice. The book remained open behind him, its pages fluttering on their own in a wind that wasn't there. The air was thick with the scent of old parchment and wet stone, as if a crypt had been cracked open in the heart of the library. And then, silence. Total and suffocating, broken only by the slow tick of the library's distant clock. Yet even that felt wrong, off rhythm, like a heart that skipped in anticipation of some great reveal. Jace turned slowly. Where the shelves once stood, there was now only darkness. Endless, swallowing shadow, but not empty. Something moved in it, something without form, but not without intention. Shapes shifted like a mirage at the edge of vision. He felt watched by 100 eyes he couldn't see. His legs moved before his mind agreed. Through the aisles, past the forgotten histories, until the world returned to some semblance of order. But the unease followed. The whisper didn't stop.
Come home.
The rules are breaking. The days that followed blurred. Jace would wake with the Necronomicon beside him, even though he remembered leaving it at the library. He would see the same stranger walking by his window at exactly 3:13 a.m., face obscured by shadows that bent unnaturally around him. Streetlights flickered in patterns. Dreams bled into waking. His phone rang with no caller ID, and when he answered, all he heard was the sea. He wasn't sure if it was real anymore, any of it. But more than that, he began to not care. The knowledge clawing at the edge of his mind had become a comfort. The madness felt like clarity in disguise. He scribbled symbols he didn't understand onto napkins, onto his walls, into the fogged mirror. He began drawing diagrams he saw in the book, constellations that didn't exist, maps of places with no coordinates, places with names like Yihantle, Leng, and Carcosa, and always, in the center, the yellow sign. The book wasn't teaching him, it was reminding him. The gilded reflection. The moment Jace's eyes fluttered shut, the world didn't fade to black. It fractured. When he woke, he was standing in his apartment, yet something was wrong. The air felt solid, as though he had stepped underwater. The walls pulsed faintly with a golden sheen, casting a dull glow over every surface. Nothing moved. Not the dust, not the clock, not even the shadow of his own breath. And yet, the room felt alive, like it was watching. He stepped forward, but his footsteps made no sound. The television flickered even though it was unplugged. It displayed only static, but behind the white noise was something else. A melody, dissonant and slow, like a forgotten music box playing underwater. The notes crawled along his skin. Jace turned toward the window, drawn by something just outside the frame. Where once there had been the familiar shapes of city buildings and streets, there was now a city in decay. Its bones swallowed by time, cloaked in yellow fog that rolled in unnatural patterns. Buildings leaned at impossible angles, black stars shone in a jaundiced sky, unmoving and sharp. The street below was empty, and then it wasn't. Figures emerged, tall, thin, and wrapped in cloaks the color of bruised parchment. Their faces were hidden behind pale masks, smooth, expressionless ovals etched with arcane symbols that shimmered with their own dim light. Jace couldn't tell if they were looking at him or beyond him. One raised a hand slowly, pointing toward his door. A whisper followed.
He who wears the mask shall never see the truth.
Jace blinked. When he looked again, the door was open, and the figures stood inside his apartment. There was no sound, no footsteps, no rustle of fabric, no breath. They glided more than moved. One stepped closer and reached for him. He didn't back away. Instead, his gaze was pulled unbidden to the mirror hanging near the hall. And there, he saw himself. No, not himself. The shape was the same, but the skin shimmered like stained glass, flickering between yellow and black. Its mouth curled upward into a grin too wide and far too knowing. The reflection raised its hand, but Jace had not. It tilted its head. He had not. The grin widened, splitting until it reached the cheekbones. Then it whispered, lips moving without sound. Jace could read the words.
It was always you.
He stumbled back, crashing into the table behind him. A heavy book slammed to the ground, its cover cracked and pulsing with faint warmth. The Necronomicon. But before he could react, the figures surrounded him. One placed a gloved hand on his forehead, fingers cold and stiff like wax. Another spoke, voice hollow and echoing, as though it came from the bottom of a well.
The reflection sees first. The self follows. You are waking into remembrance.
The mirror behind them shattered, but not into shards. It crumbled like sand, revealing something beyond. A stage, a curtain, flickering lights, applause, and a voice calling his name. Not his name exactly. A name he hadn't known he had. Jace opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The figures stepped aside. The broken mirror frame pulsed with light, and something behind the curtain began to move. And with it, a new whisper.
Let the play begin.
The stairs of Carcosa. Jace stepped through the mirror frame. There was no transition, no sense of movement, just a sudden shift, like blinking between realities. One moment he stood in the apartment's warped reflection, and the next his feet touched velvet. Gold-dusted stairs stretched endlessly both above and below him, suspended in a black void pierced by distant yellow stars. The air buzzed like static, thick with incense and rot. Somewhere far below, faint strings played a mournful, lilting tune. The sound echoed with no source, yet it felt personal, like something composed only for him. Each stair he took downward bent beneath his weight, creaking not with wood, but with breath. He clutched the banister, though it pulsed like a living vein, and began his descent. As he walked, he noticed inscriptions carved into the steps. At first, they were simple etchings, eyes, moons, crowns. Then words, lines from the king in yellow, though in no version he had ever read.
I wore the mask so long, I forgot my face. He calls from the twin suns that never set. Truth is the dream from which we cannot wake.
The deeper he descended, the more the architecture changed. The stairs shifted shape, some curved into grotesque, Escher-like loops, others folded impossibly into themselves. Doors appeared in the walls, flickering in and out of phase. Behind them, he caught glimpses of rooms filled with broken clocks, weeping statues, and actors rehearsing scenes in dead languages. One door opened as he passed. A cloaked figure beckoned to him from within. Their mask was cracked, leaking thick gold fluid from one eye hole.
Where is this place?
Jace asked, but the words came out like a whisper underwater. The figure responded in riddles.
Where all things wait to be remembered. The city that dreams you back. Carcosa.
The name slithered through his thoughts, dragging something loose in his mind. A memory. A dream. A place that had always existed, but only now revealed itself. The figure vanished, and the door closed of its own accord. Jace continued. As he descended farther, the music grew louder. It came from everywhere and nowhere. A stage loomed ahead, suspended over nothingness. On it stood rows of marionettes, their strings tangled in constellations. They wore robes like the masked figures and danced in mechanical rhythm to an invisible conductor. Jace knew, without knowing how, that one of them was him. Another door appeared, this one open, and inside he saw his own body sleeping in bed. His breathing was shallow, the Necronomicon still clutched in his hands. But around the bed were symbols carved into the floor, glyphs he had never drawn, yet seemed to come from him. He reached for the door. It slammed shut. The stairs began to crumble beneath his feet. He ran, the void roaring around him as reality thinned. Voices rose from the blackness.
Return. You are the echo of the mask.
Suddenly, the stairs ended. Before him, suspended in the dark, was a massive golden theater. Its seats were empty, but Jace could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching him. On the stage stood a figure robed in tatters, its face concealed by a long yellow mask. It bowed, and then it spoke with Jace's voice.
Now, wake up.
The breach of flesh and dream. Jace's eyes snapped open, but something was wrong. The ceiling above him twisted like melted wax, pulsing with slow, deliberate heartbeats. The room breathed. The walls shimmered in hues of gold and violet, shifting in and out of focus like a mirage. Shadows moved even though the light stood still. His body felt foreign, like it had only recently been returned to him, as if something else had been using it while he slept. He sat up slowly. The Necronomicon was still there, resting on his chest, closed now, but faintly warm, as though it had a pulse of its own. The glyphs he saw in the dream were still etched into the floor around his bed, glowing faintly, as if scorched into the wood by something that did not exist in this world. Jace stood, his legs trembling, not from fear, but from dissonance. His balance felt off, like the laws of gravity were being renegotiated moment by moment. The mirror across the room no longer reflected him. Instead, it showed the version of him from the dream, golden-eyed, smiling faintly, its head tilting in mockery. The reflection raised a hand and traced a spiral in the air. Jace's skin burned where the shape should have been. He tore his gaze away. He stumbled to the window and looked out. The city was wrong. Streets curved upward into impossible arcs. Buildings bled yellow light, and their windows blinked like eyes. People walked in looping patterns, repeating motions over and over as though they were caught in some great theatrical performance. Others stood motionless, their mouths open in silent screams, faces melted or replaced with smooth, featureless masks. The fog had returned, thick and humming, with that same static buzz from the stairs. Somewhere in the distance, a horn blew, a deep, brassy sound that resonated in his chest, vibrating through bone. The dream had not ended. Or perhaps the dream had been a message, a signal that the boundary had weakened. And now the veil had torn. His phone lay on the floor, vibrating endlessly. When he picked it up, the screen displayed nothing but a single phrase.
He sees you now.
Jace dropped it. He tried to leave his apartment. The hallway outside stretched infinitely in both directions, repeating the same flickering light, the same cracked painting, the same door with a rusted number 9. He ran for what felt like hours, but every path led him back to his front door. Inside, the lights dimmed. The radio turned on by itself, playing a melody he heard in the dream, the mournful string tune. Over it, a voice whispered,
"The play has begun. The audience waits."
He clutched his head as the walls bent inward. He was not dreaming. He was awake, and reality itself was breaking, bending around him like a stage set mid-rehearsal. The city, the people, even his body. They were props now, paper-thin constructs in a theater that had no beginning and no end. Jace screamed, but no sound came out. A door appeared where none had been, a black rectangle pulsing with yellow veins. It led down, far down, to Carcosa, and behind it he could feel them. Watching, waiting, applauding. He was no longer reading the play. He was part of it. Carcosa Waits. The door loomed before him, pulsing with a rhythm too human to be natural, too alien to be coincidence. The yellow veins across its surface squirmed subtly beneath the skin of the wood, like roots searching for fertile ground, or veins carrying tainted blood to a diseased heart. Jace stepped forward. The door opened for him, not with a creak, but with a sigh. The kind of sound something makes when it's been waiting a long, long time. Beyond it, there were stairs, endless, downward-sloping stairs cut into black stone, spiraling in ways that defied gravity and logic. With every step he took, the air thickened, not with humidity, but history. Forgotten centuries clung to the walls like cobwebs spun from time itself. He descended, and with every step, the sound of the horn grew louder, a mournful, drawn-out wail that curved through the spiral like a serpent. He recognized it now, not a call, but an invitation, a reminder that he was late to something ancient. The deeper he went, the more the world changed. The stairs eventually ended, giving way to cracked marble streets under a dark golden sky. Black stars shimmered in slow spirals above. The moon hung in pieces like a shattered mask, bleeding yellow mist. He had arrived.
Carcosa,
He said. The city was endless. Towers rose at impossible angles, some floating sideways in mid-air, others upside down like teeth from a giant buried skull. Bridges led nowhere. Statues wept blood that turned to gold upon touching the ground. Everywhere the masked figures moved. Some walked slowly, hands clasped. Others danced in silence. Their masks were white, silver, gold, obsidian, each marked with a single symbol from the play, from the book, from the dream. A spiral, a crown, an eye, a bleeding sun. Jace stumbled into a central plaza where a great stage stood. Its curtains billowed despite the lack of wind, and behind them shadows moved, something vast, preparing, stretching. And then the curtain parted, not fully, just enough to reveal him, the one Jace saw in the mirror, smiling, watching. A voice echoed, not from the figure, but from inside Jace's mind, like a script being whispered into an actor's ear.
You have read the words, spoken the name, taken the path. You are no longer Jace. You are the role.
Jace clutched his chest. His skin burned where the spiral had been traced. The crowd turned toward him. The masked ones bowed. They were waiting for him. The golden-eyed reflection stepped forward, down the steps of the stage, onto the marble plaza. The reflection extended its hand. Jace felt something crack, not in the air, not in the world, but in his soul. He took the hand. The moment their skin touched, the sky screamed. Reality, his reality, snapped like brittle glass. The theater lights turned on, blinding. Endless rows of shadowy spectators clapped in unison, a standing ovation. But Jace wasn't on the stage. He was the stage.